Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is Stephen Maycock. I'm a development surveyor and associate here at Vickery Holman. I also head up the development consultancy team. From all four of our offices, that being Truro, Plymouth, Exeter and Bristol, we provide a full range of services to clients. That includes development appraisals and valuations, financial viability assessments, land acquisition and disposal, and also dispute resolution. I'm based out of our Truro office, where my focus is largely valuations and viability work. So I'm joined today by two of my development colleagues, Greg Oldreeve and Tim West, and also by our guest speaker, Anthony Eke from LiveWest. Very grateful that you could join us this morning, Anthony, and we look forward to hearing your insights shortly. So Greg and then Tim, perhaps you'd like to join me on stage and perhaps you can briefly introduce yourselves to the audience. And then Anthony, if you'd also like to introduce yourself and perhaps tell us a little bit about the organisation that you work for, that would be great. So Greg, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, good morning everyone. Greg Oldreeve, Senior Development Surveyor in Vickery Holman. I tend to deal with dispute resolution, acquisition, disposal, but also financial viability assessments.
Good morning everyone, my name is Tim West and I operate the eastern part of the development business between Bristol and Exeter, focusing on valuation, viability, consultancy and agency work.
Hi there. Thanks very much for inviting me today. I'm Anthony Eke, new business manager and part of the development team at LiveWest. And I've been invited here to provide a quick rundown of the current issues affecting the affordable housing sector.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot for that, guys. So this is the second webinar of this series where we are discussing all things development. Greg is going to kick us off today with a market roundup, so offering his insights into what is going on in the sector generally. Tim is then going to give us a bit of an Exeter update where he'll be looking at recent new developments of interest and also looking at some of the planned projects for the city. I'm then going to talk about the housing crisis, so looking at housing shortage issues and the lack of affordability, before handing over to Anthony, who's, as he said, going to give us a talk about the social housing sector and talk a little bit about LiveWest and their ambitions as a provider. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions along the way, then please pop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them before the end of the session. So that's enough from me, I think. So Greg, I'll hand over to you for the first segment. Thank you.
Hi everyone, yes, quick update on the market, where we are at the current time. I think a quick input with the market is very busy at the moment, and if anything feels a little bit volatile. This year's surge in the residential values is certainly stoking the fuel into the development land market, which has become somewhat competitive, a little hot, possibly too hot. Landowners and agents are residualizing these higher prices into higher land valuation aspirations, which I personally think is incorrect. It's just simply not that simple. Between houses and land, there is a shed load of costs, including build costs, finance, fees, community contributions, and profit. Whilst fees and finance have not changed much in recent years, build costs and community contributions are increasing. According to BCIS, build costs increased by 4.2% in the third quarter of this year, 9.1% over the past 12 months. For some of you in the southwest, this may not feel quite enough, and I think certainly our prices have been higher than that. Whilst demand has been strong, the real issue has been in supply chain restrictions, and the imbalance is producing inflation in costs. Whilst there has been some recent levelling out, for example, steel and timber, but equilibrium is not expected in the market for at least another 12 months. And during that time, it is expected that costs could increase by another 3 to 4%. Over the next 4 years, it is anticipated that build costs could increase by as much as 15%. And this is not simply inflation. Build specifications are increasing, in part due to the lower carbon living standards, but also lifestyle changes, including home working. Better homes will cost certainly more to build, certainly initially. One would hope that better builds would add to GDV, but this is not apparent at the current time. Community contributions, their costs are also increasing. Local planning authorities expect some of the increase in GDVs to be channeled towards the community costs resulting in new developments, certainly until developments are fully policy compliant. Biodiversity net gain, phosphate runoff management, climate emergency are recent and emerging policies that new developments must comply with, which does come at a cost. Valuing and appraising development land by comparison with the sale of historic planning land with historic planning and extant consents, and then adding house inflation is wrong and appeases landowners' aspirations for increased land values. Residual appraisals reflecting current GDVs, costs and planning policy is the only way that you can accurately assess land value. On the face of it, the increase in GDVs are balanced by the increase in land values, but having said that, land values appear to be increasing, and how's that happening? The final input to any appraisal is profit, and it appears to us that developers are certainly reducing their profit margins, partially endorsed by the growing competition for development funding market and or building in further house price inflation within the programme. Both of these are dangerous, and hence my comment earlier on about overheating and volatility. Whilst we remain optimistic about the development sector, we do urge our clients, when bidding to acquire sites, to be cautious and emphasise the need to use a fully policy compliant viability appraisal and to consider changes and future changes in development plan policies. That's a brief overview of the market. I hope it's interesting, and I'm now going to pass over to Tim.
Many thanks, Greg. Okay, so this morning I'm going to provide a quick snapshot update of developments in Exeter. So the latest government figures taken from the housing delivery test show that Devon as a whole built 30% more new homes than it was required to over a 5-year period, in effect building about 6,300 more houses than they had to, over and above the target of 4,600 new homes set up by the government. Exeter itself over-delivered by 45%, 25% and 90% over the past 3 years, equating to an average of around 53%, and by 50% overall across the past 5 years. This reflected about 1,500 excess houses above the target set out. In 2019-20, the number of open market dwellings started in Exeter dropped from 300 to 190. This number then recovered to 490 new dwellings started in the 2020-21 period. In terms of completions, some 390 new homes were delivered in 2018-19, a number which dropped across the next 2 years to 260 in 2019-20 and to 220 last year. The data suggests that there is a backlog of housing to be delivered from schemes started during the last 12 to 18 months in the city. Exeter is seen as one of the fastest growing cities in the country in terms of population, housing, new business startups and employment. Student retention rates in the city are relatively high compared to the rest of the country, and first-time buyers are being encouraged to the city with an increase of mixed-use development in the city centre and a reintroduction particularly of more residential use. By doing this, the council is hoping to create a vibrant city environment and facilitate an economy which runs into the evening. The number and value of Help to Buy loans contributing to sales in Exeter has remained relatively consistent across the last 5 years, hitting a peak of 11.3 million in 2018 and reflecting circa 8 million per year since then. Major schemes currently underway in the city include the bus station and Harlequin Centre, which are providing major mixed-use regeneration projects in key parts of the city centre, and a number of student schemes also having been recently completed and are breathing new life into the city centre. The forthcoming City Point redevelopment plan for the Civic Centre will also deliver around 850,000 square foot of floor space, including new office space to attract businesses and jobs into the city, flexible workspace, hotels, leisure and other retail uses, as well as new homes for sale and rent. One of the council's key aims set out in the Livable Exeter Vision for 2040 is to make Exeter an exemplar of a sustainable city by addressing social, economic and environmental challenges. Livable Exeter is an ambitious 20-year programme that will see 12,000 new homes built across the city, as well as investment in sustainable transport and major infrastructure. Another key aim is to meet the city's objective to be carbon neutral by 2030, an initiative which is led by the Exeter City Futures. On the periphery of the city, areas such as Pinho have seen major residential developments in the last 3 years, with major house builders such as Bloor, Barrett, Cavanagh and Burrington or delivering major schemes amounting to approximately 1,500 new homes in the former village, now major suburb. All in all, there's a lot going on in the city, and clearly there's going to be lots of opportunities to be had across the next 5 years as the city deliver their vision. And we'd be happy to discuss anything that comes forward for you in that period. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Steve.
Thanks for that interesting update, Tim. So as I mentioned at the outset, I'm going to briefly look at the UK's housing crisis at a headline level and touch on some of the issues around housing shortage and affordability. So according to government statistics, there are more than 25 million homes in the UK right now. In the 30 years to 2021, 3 million fewer properties were built than in the previous 30 years. However, during that time, the population increased by more than 9 million. The issue is getting worse as well, with the government constantly failing to build anything close to the 300,000 new homes needed a year to match demand. The lack of homes has also contributed to the growing concern of homelessness, with a 169% rise occurring since 2010. With demand far outstripping supply, it's no surprise that residential property prices are now at record levels and clearly unaffordable for a good proportion of aspiring first-time buyers. The issue has been exacerbated this year, of course, with prices rising at their quickest rate for over 15 years. And whilst wages are going up as well, the gap is continuing to widen. Research from Halifax shows the average home in the UK now costs 8.1 times average earnings. That's the highest on record since the lender started tracking the figure some 10 years ago. In 2020, the ratio was about 7.5 times earnings. The shortage of homes and inflated price for those which are offered for sale has in turn increased demand for rental properties, which has led to average asking prices for properties outside of London exceeding £1,000 per calendar month for the first time ever. With accommodation costs rising, this is consuming a disproportionately larger chunk of household income. Shelter estimate that private renters on average spend around 40% of their household income on rent. The disparity between earnings, savings and rising house prices, not to mention increasing costs of living, is putting a significant burden on first-time buyers, and this looks set to continue into 2022. So on the surface, building more homes should help lower prices, therefore making housing more affordable for everyone. But the reality is dealing with the crisis is as much about affordable housing as it is about the amount of housing delivered. Modelling by the National Housing Federation estimates that we need to build 145,000 affordable homes a year, including 90,000 for social rent, to meet current housing need. Yet the latest figures from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities shows that just 57,600 affordable homes were completed between April 19 and March 20. In the same period, 68,300 new projects started, which is an indication for the completion figures we can expect in the coming years. Based on these current statistics, delivering the levels of affordable homes needed looks like a near impossible feat, yet history shows us that it is possible. At the beginning of the 1970s, almost 1/3 of all homes across the UK, that's around 5.5 million, were social, delivered largely by local authorities. It wasn't until the 1980s, when the Thatcher government turbocharged the Right to Buy initiative, that the number of council homes started to plummet. As it stands, there are less than 1.6 million local authority homes in England, with a further 3.1 million owned by private registered providers, which combined makes up less than 20% of the total stock. The government are making conscious efforts to address the need for affordable housing delivery. The Affordable Homes Programme is going to provide funding towards the cost of building new affordable homes, with 11.5 billion allocated as part of the largest single investment in the sector for almost 10 years. The programme should see around 180,000 homes delivered over a 5-year period, and grant applications are being welcomed by housing associations, local authorities, developers, and community-led organisations who have an interest in developing affordable homes. Homes England have already announced 31 new strategic partnerships that will deliver 90,000 of these homes. LiveWest are one of those partnerships, but I'll let Anthony expand on this in a bit shortly. So more funding is obviously very important, but so are other things like improving the planning system, which continues to be a barrier to delivery. We've just recently found out that there'll be a new £4.8 billion funding package for local authorities, which, among other things, should help alleviate some of the pressures on local planning departments who continue to be massively under-resourced. There are, of course, some very significant planning reforms currently being considered, and in theory, proposals such as the new zonal approach to development should make it more difficult to oppose new housing schemes and generally speed up the process. But whilst this may enable more development, the risk, of course, is that it will simply just greenlight yet more unaffordable housing. Just how the proposed infrastructure levy would work in terms of on-site delivery and off-site payments is still an unknown, but certainly some in the industry are concerned that it will lead to the reduction in the number of affordable homes being delivered. It is worth mentioning, of course, that all of these reforms are up in the air at the moment as we await the new Secretary of State's review of the planning bill, which we should hear more about shortly. So in addition to planning reforms, which will help enable more development, we're also going to have to start building those homes much quicker, so utilising modern methods of construction. National Housing Federation research suggests that it could be possible to build up to 4 times as many homes using these methods compared with traditional bricks and mortar, and that's without the need for additional on-site labour. But I do recognise there are challenges in bringing this to the mass market. We also need to consider the type of housing that we're providing, which needs to include good quality senior housing and extra care provision, which will then free up larger unoccupied family homes for younger generations. And then in terms of supporting first-time buyers, we've got things like the mortgage guarantee scheme. That was an initiative launched back in April, which allows buyers to purchase property with a deposit of just 5%, made possible by a financial guarantee from the government. There's also the Help to Buy equity loan scheme, which runs until March 23. But with any of these low deposit initiatives, interest rates are generally quite high, and with interest rates looking likely to rise, possibly to 1% by the end of 2022, borrowing will become more expensive, which, coupled with higher inflation, will mean a further strain on finances. So I think in summary, 2022 is most likely going to be characterised by continued undersupply with a combination of increasing house prices and upward average rents, ensuring both a very competitive market, but one with significant barriers of entry for first-time buyers. So I hope that was an interesting overview and a bit of an insight into some of the challenges that we're facing as a country on this issue. And it sets the scene nicely, I think, for Anthony, who of course works for a housing provider in the Southwest. So it'll be interesting to hear what LiveWest plans are for growth and what hurdles they're likely to come across in realising that growth. So Anthony, I'll hand over to you.
Lovely. Well, thanks, Stephen. Yes, I'm indeed Anthony Eke, a new business manager at LiveWest. And I've been given around about a 10-minute slot to outline all the current issues affecting the sector, which, in light of what's already been said, which I will try and do my best. But the good news is, what I would say is really reinforcing much of what has already been said. In case you've not come across us, LiveWest is the largest housing provider operating solely in the Southwest and currently owns over 37,000 homes across the region. Despite the severe disruption last year, we managed to develop 784 homes, 700 of which were affordable, investing over £100 million in doing so. In 2020, we managed to develop 1,245 new homes, which is more typical of our level of delivery as we work towards our growth target of 1,600 homes per annum. At LiveWest, we believe in a home for everyone. However, this remains the big challenge for the sector. The Southwest is an area of high housing need, as well as high house prices, which makes accessing housing particularly challenging for many families. ONS statistics show that house prices largely between 8.1 and 11.7 times the annual earnings across the Southwest in 2020. Indeed, the only local authorities under 8 times earnings in that area are Plymouth and South Somerset. The COVID pandemic has accelerated these trends, as it has many others. Over the course of the last 12 months, we've seen significant increases in households registered and actively bidding for affordable housing. Need registers in some areas have increased by a third. In Cornwall, bids of 30 for 2 and 3 bedroom housing across the county were not unusual. Now we're seeing bids of over 100 regularly in the weekly adverts, with one property in Porthleven recently attracting over 300 bids. Oh, sorry. So I'm doing a Boris at this point in time. I seem to have lost a page. Great. Sorry about this. The Trussell Trust, a charity that supports a network of over 1,200 food bank centres, saw a 42% increase in the number of parcels giving out during the first 6 months of the COVID-19 pandemic, and a 49% increase in the number of children being supported by emergency food compared to pre-pandemic levels. We at LiveWest recognised the financial difficulties that our customers were facing and approved a £600,000 increase in hardship grant funds, which has seen a 700% increase in applications compared to previous years at that time. This, together with current inflationary and cost of living pressures, are reasons that we have started to see many local authorities calling housing emergencies. In response to this, we've adopted ambitious plans to invest more than £1 billion in the southwest economy and to build 6,000 new homes in the region over the next 5 years. This will largely be from delivery of affordable housing in the form of social and affordable rented properties and shared ownership. However, we also develop housing for market sale, with profits reinvested into the provision of additional affordable homes. As part of this strategy, we were pleased to be successful in reaffirming our status as a Homes England strategic partner, which has enabled us to secure grant funding for our development programme through to 2028 to provide 2,550 new affordable homes as part of that overall programme. As part of our strategic partnership bid, we've committed to build out 25% of our programme through the use of modern methods of construction, or MMC, which is now widely seen as a significant driver to increase building capacity across the industry. One of the stumbling blocks for MMC has been how to scale up the industry to achieve economies of scale so that build costs are competitive against traditional build. To try and address this, LiveWest have been one of the founding members of Building Better. This is a strategic alliance of housing associations and supported by the National Housing Federation, working together to create a robust pipeline of development opportunities to maintain a framework for contractors so that more competitive pricing can be achieved. Despite this, there remain significant constraints across the southwest, such as the topography of sites, access through roads, etc., and distance to factories, which means the use of MMC will be very much opportunity-led still. The green agenda is a top priority challenge for many organisations, and ours is no different. The government has set a target for all social housing to be upgraded to provide energy performance certification of Band C by 2030. We want to meet the government's target earlier than planned by achieving this in 2028. This affects approximately 9,000 homes across our geography and in our ownership. This is being done in consultation with our customers, looking at the fabric of our homes first. And this fabric first approach means checking whether heat is escaping from the home, installing extra insulation, or upgrading doors and windows to reduce it. We will then look at other ways in which we can make our homes more energy efficient and reduce the carbon footprint, for example, by installing solar panels or new heating systems. We've recently adopted our environmental strategy, which covers all aspects of our business. In terms of development, our aims are to focus on to improve the specification of new housing where we are able to influence outcomes, to achieve enhanced EPC ratings of A or a high B. This is largely achieved through a fabric-first approach to design, with complementary renewable technologies where needed. The specification of our housing is being looked at to accommodate a longer-term view to enable the retrofit of heat pumps and to improve on performance standards dictated by future building regulations that may come into force and review by the end of 2022. And indeed, we've already seen some announcements from government about that recently. We are working with our suppliers to reduce waste and plastic within schemes and during construction, while collaborating across sectors to share best practice. Biodiversity is an important pillar of our strategy also. Our new developments will require to replace any removed trees on a 2-for-1 basis, while also including biodiverse and multifunctional planned green spaces. However, the general matter of biodiversity net gain is an area that presents a challenge to the industry. The environmental bill, which has now achieved royal assent, and as such is law for developments to achieve a 10% biodiversity net gain, subject to a 2-year transition. However, a number of local authorities have already sought to adopt policies requiring new developments to demonstrate that a 10% biodiversity net gain will be achieved. Whilst the aim of such policies clearly demonstrate the right intentions, it will have a knock-on effect, either through reduced development densities or viability, as additional land purchases or off-site credits will need to be bought. The result we're likely to see is less affordable housing being delivered. The Grenfell Tower disaster in June 2017 forced registered providers to look at their current assets to ensure accommodation provided to customers is safe. It has had an impact upon our development specifications. We now require fire risk assessments to be undertaken on all blocks of flats pre-contract to ensure the design is robust. Also, all external treatments such as cladding and balconies must be of class A1 or A2 fire rated products. Following a ministerial statement in May 2021, the provision of first homes became a material consideration in planning applications. The intention being that 25% of the affordable housing provision is to be first homes. In many instances, this will replace the intermediate element provision such as shared ownership tenures. The first homes would be sold at a minimum discount of 30% of market value, although a number of local authorities are consulting on whether this discount can be increased across their jurisdictions. The homes will also remain tied to Section 106 obligations, meaning local connection criteria can apply, as can reduced qualifying income levels of purchasers. Other than the obvious impact on the sector posed by first homes, being the reduction in shared ownership provision, there will be other effects for developers. They will be responsible to market and sell these homes alongside the market housing. This may represent additional marketing costs while also potentially causing a conflict with the sale of other entry-level housing they'll be building. It will also not be possible for registered providers to cash flow the provision of first homes as they could for affordable housing they will be acquiring themselves, which may represent additional finance costs for the scheme. Also, when the unfettered market value of the home is considered, registered providers can usually pay more if the affordable home was provided as shared ownership against the 30% discount needed as a first home, affecting the prospective income to the scheme. When all this is considered, the implementation of first homes is likely to have a negative effect on a development appraisal and therefore could result in reduced affordable provision. The final issue affecting our industry today that I will talk about is one of opportunity. The last couple of years has seen the development industry face a turbulent and incredibly unpredictable set of circumstances. While the increase in house prices has helped the industry, significant build cost inflation and reduced availability of materials and labour has been detrimental. We've certainly seen the latter impact upon delivery timelines. Despite this, we've seen that views of the positive seem to outweigh the negative in the evidence that demand for development opportunities has driven up land values as developers look to secure pipelines of projects. And likewise, competition across the RP sector has increased as providers look to fill development programs, which has also resulted in some providers starting to look outside their traditional patches. So in this sense, the issue is not capacity within the sector, but one of the aforementioned availability of opportunity. In the presence of a growing affordability crisis, we need to do more, and we're rightly being challenged to do so. Industry is faced with new challenges, and as ever, the best approach to deal with them is to work collaboratively to establish solutions and best practices. Whether it's through our relationships with local authorities and contractors, or involvement with alliances such as Building Better, we at LiveWest are always keen to be engaged in such conversations and be part of the solution to help build a home for everyone. Thank you all very much for your time. That kind of wraps up my summary. I'll pass back to Stephen to wrap things up. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Anthony. Leslie, perhaps you could just invite our other speakers onto the stage a minute. I can't actually see that we've got any questions from the audience at this stage. But Anthony, I mean, perhaps just to kick us off, one from me, picking up on your comment around building standards. There are obviously increasing pressures on housing associations now to spend more and more money on their existing stock. I'm just interested as to how you're balancing this with equal pressures, I guess, to meet ambitious growth targets. Does something have to give in this equation, or can you manage both?
Yeah, difficult. A lot of it depends on who you are. I mean, ultimately, increased costs in your existing stock will come out of budgets. So registered providers will need to account with that within their budgets and their balances. So we are likely to see surpluses probably reduced to try and accommodate the improvements that are required here. And for some RPs, we may find that impact upon their development programs. And I think we have seen that in areas like the Southeast, where we probably have seen an increase in kind of institutional funders come in for kind of rented-based models. But all this needs to be seen really, I suppose, in the bigger picture of things, in that this all is good for our customers. We are reducing the cost of their housing, the cost of their living, through making these improvements and improving the stock that we have. So, in that light, it can only be encouraged.
Okay, fine. Okay, thanks for that. And I mean, just one other follow-up from me as well. We've spoken recently about how the sector is becoming more competitive. We're seeing more local authorities and for-profit organisations entering the market. I guess this in likely is going to push up land prices and Section 106 prices especially. Is there a concern that more providers is just going to lead to more continued price inflation, which is only really going to benefit the developers, I guess, or do we need to see more commercial organisations operating in this space, to bridge those supply issues that we've been talking about?
You know what? I think after the last 2 years, I'm done predicting. It really, things have almost become irrational in some places. I mean, prior to the pandemic, we did start to see an influx of new players come into the market, and that certainly influenced things with pension funds and institutional funders starting to look at different affordability markets and things like that, which started to already see some inflation, but that seems to be kind of accelerated really over the last 6 months or so. We all, at some point, I think, probably need to take a breath on things, but it's difficult to say that when you're in amongst everything and you're trying to make things happen, particularly with the development programs we have. As I said in the presentation, I don't think certainly not for the Southwest, capacity is really the issue. It is opportunity at this point, with an ever decreasing kind of pot of available and deliverable, and I think deliverable is the key development sites coming forward. You've already seen areas such as Bodmin with the nitrates issue being affected with delivery coming forward, which is also affecting a lot of the Somerset large strategic sites as well, which is putting pressure on delivery coming forward. And it's safe to say sometimes, these new players coming in, as I said, have influenced things, but sometimes they've acted, and I would describe it as almost non-commercially, in that there are things perhaps that they are not able to achieve or not able to progress with. So the conclusion I would always take away from this is often, good relationships are the best way to resolve issues on development sites. The RPs across the Southwest have been here for a long time and for a good reason, in that we have good working relationships with developers and good skills to try and work through and deal with solutions.
So you think there is loyalty there then among developers? You think then who have got these long entrenched relationships with RPs in the region? Then it possibly might be difficult for new entrants to break into that possibly.
The bottom line speaks still. Don't get me wrong. there will, developers do like to pick up the phone to talk to people they've got an existing relationship with to see if they can make it work. But the bottom line does still talk. So we can't dispute that.
Do you think, Anthony, there's an issue with regard to, a supply of development land, and more could be done by Homes England and local authorities in terms of infrastructure and enabling works? I mean, I know there's the project going on at Marsh Mills with Homes England picking up the old ECLP premises there and bringing that forward. But do you think we could see more of that? Because, is this blocking development? This sort of infrastructure issues, new roads, drainage systems. Could they help us in that respect or not?
I suspect you're probably right, particularly with the drive to focus development on brownfield land at this point in time. And your example on the Marsh Mills, I think, is a perfect one, which, if Homes England didn't get involved in that side, I don't think it would have happened. They were able to influence things where a private developer, with the outlay of money required to bring that site forward up front, would be detrimental, I think, in them looking at it. Infrastructure is. Sorry,
I always thought this is an opportunity for SMEs. If somebody took the responsibility to bring forward these big chunks of land and then compartmentalize it and break it up into smaller lots, that allows SMEs to come in, because SMEs, traditionally probably have lower profit margins because they got this blended profit between construction and development. And can produce more, I think. And I know it's always been a target of the government to get SMEs involved, but it just doesn't seem to have happened.
No, and I think part of the issue there is SMEs wise, the market can somewhat be against them sometimes. And what we're seeing at this point in time is the cost of bonds, performance bonds, increasing for them, or becoming much, much harder to get hold of. NHBC, in terms of insolvency cover, has been more cautious if it is indeed available. Premier, etc., have withdrawn certain covers. So, in those kind of aspects, in trying to provide security, life has been made more difficult for SMEs coming forward, and particularly in the current marketplace, with the availability of materials and such, like, as you say, because their margins generally are tighter, they're less able sometimes to ride these markets. But I don't disagree with the general point, in that SMEs, if they can be encouraged to bring forward by packaging these sites up, could be a very, very good thing to increase capacity and house building across the southwest.
I've seen a couple of interesting things recently. Just go off at a bit of a tangent on alternative ways of doing things, and I saw an example of co-living, where a group of people of a certain age had bought a fairly substantial country house, and were basically sharing it to live in it. And there was 15 of them, I think 15. I can't remember how many couples it was now. Developed 15, and obviously that had given up 15 houses for other people, or 14 houses for other people to go and live in. So I think there's other ways of supply that we're currently not really exploiting properly. I mean, custom build, co-living, shared living, especially as Steve mentioned, for sort of the more elderly, should we say that, population, for looking at different ways of providing housing and dealing with housing. And I know we're very conventional about our English castles and the way that we live, but I think there's an opportunity to think about this differently, and to increase housing supply by other means than we currently have.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that, and particularly the topic of the elderly housing, I think is an interesting one at this point. Is a lot of the barriers for that is people leave it too late to move. At which point, often that they can't, they become stuck, they become entrenched in their housing, which then becomes unsuitable for their needs. And I think a lot of people will be guilty of that. And one of the biggest conversations, some of the big conversations we have internally, certainly with our asset management teams, is people when their needs are realised, do regret not moving earlier. So, those conversations need to be had, I suppose, at a much earlier stage.
Mm.
I'll just pick up on the questions. There's still no questions from the audience, so a quiet bunch this morning. But I'm not sure. Tim, was there anything else you wanted to put to Anthony whilst we've got him, or I can look to start wrapping up otherwise?
Well, yeah, I'm very interested about this biodiversity net gain business, and I know you said that you think it's going to result in a reduction of affordable houses. Do you think that's the only way that the market's going to rationalise these increased requirements?
Well, if you look at the basic viability appraisal, what are you always knocking back? You're always knocking back affordable housing. So whatever way you look at it, either you're looking at a scheme which could have developed 40 units, but now you're developing 20 because the remainder of the site has got to be returned to some form of nature and improved. That will reduce affordable housing just simply by numbers. But if you're increasing costs because you have got to pay an off-site contribution of something that it's got to come off somewhere. And what we're not seeing at the moment is it coming off land receipts, with landowners ever expecting more. And this is my personal opinion, is that the kind of the land value setup, the way we deal with land at the moment in this country, I don't think is quite fit for purpose when we introduce new policies like this, because in theory, the land value should react to the new policy coming forward. But because of the nature of the market, it does not seem to, which forever results in viability appraisals until effectively house prices increase to accommodate the change that has been proposed.
Thanks for that. Just picking up, though, got a question here from Ian. Ian says, Homes England was mentioned, and it was identified that they could do more about infrastructure, but what other elements could they assist with? Should they be bringing more sites forward or simply just facilitating conversions? Greg, I think you were mentioning that. Did you want to pick up on that?
I did. I'm not criticising Home England, and hi Ian, nice to see you. The funds are there and available for them. I just don't think that the housing authorities are taking advantage of this. And I think there's more work they could do using the Homes England funding to unblock sites that are currently not happening, either through compulsory purchase or by providing funding, taking on the enabling works, bringing it forward for other people. So I think there's work around there that could help.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay, I think that is it for questions, and we are just about coming to the end of the session. A couple of minutes left.
Biodiversity. Just to let everybody know that I was contacted the other day by Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and I have invited them to come and perhaps give a talk at our next update. But they are offering to help people with biodiversity net gain by taking it off site. So they have a number of reserves and obviously things around Cornwall, and I guess it would be the same with other trusts elsewhere, where they could use people's biodiversity net gain funding to improve their reserves and wildlife areas. So hopefully they're going to come and give us a chat about that next time. And also just to mention, for those who weren't aware of it, but Cornwall are undertaking a review of their housing strategy at the moment, which is a lot of conversation about second homes and how to control second homes and permitted development rights. And, I'd encourage people to have a look at that on their website and get involved in that conversation.
For sure. Okay. No, that's great. Thanks a lot for that, Greg. As I said, if there are no other closing remarks from any of our guests, then I'll wrap it up there, I think. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope the content has been interesting and informative. As I mentioned at the start, we are looking to run another webinar probably in the spring of next year. So if there are any topics you would like to see us cover, then just let us know and we'll see what we can do. Feel free, of course, to pop any one of us an email or give us a call. Our details are on the screen there now. A special thanks to our guest speaker this morning, Anthony Eke. It's been great to have you on board this morning. Hope you can join us again, perhaps at a future event. Thanks also to my colleagues Tim and Greg, and also to Leslie Anderson from Hedgerow Marketing, who's made this event possible this morning. If there are any colleagues or contacts of yours who you think may be interested in what we've had to talk about today, then there will be a video recording on our YouTube channel, which you can find via our website. So I think on that note, thanks again, and hope to see you all again soon. Cheers.